Everybody believes a car battery is supposed to last 4 or 5 years. That number gets repeated by sales clerks, by the printed receipt at the counter, by the warranty sticker glued to the top of the case. In my shop, after 30-some years of pulling dead batteries out of frustrated customers' cars on cold mornings, I can tell you that belief is shaky. A surprising number of the budget tier batteries crossing my workbench today are quietly tapping out somewhere between 14 and 18 months. Not dead, not obviously failed, just weakened to the point where one cold snap, one parasitic draw, one lazy alternator, and the car refuses to wake up in the driveway. The smell of warm electrolyte hangs over the battery tester when I'm running the load. The little screen flashes yellow. The customer says, "But I just bought this thing." And I have to nod, because what veteran technicians commonly report is that the gap between what you paid for and what you got has been widening for years. So let me walk you through 7 archetypes of battery I see fail early, and what I'd watch for before you trust your morning commute to one of them. I'll start with the one that lands in my bay most often. The Warehouse Club private label battery. You know the kind. Bright label, generous sounding warranty. Price that makes the brand name unit next to it look insulting. In my experience, these tend to be sourced from rotating manufacturing partners, which means the unit you bought last spring may not be made by the same plant as the unit your neighbor bought last fall. Quality control can drift. The cold cranking amp rating printed on the label is the rating it produced when fresh on a test bench, not the rating it will hold through a humid summer in a hot engine bay. I've pulled these batteries at 16 months, with internal resistance climbing past the threshold where they reliably start a tired 4-cylinder. The warranty replacement process can be smooth, to their credit. But you still spent a Saturday morning in a parking lot waiting for a jump. Here's the technical piece that matters. Battery health is mostly about plate thickness, alloy purity, and how tightly the internal components are packed inside the case. Think of the plates like the pages of a thick book. A premium battery has heavier, denser pages. A budget battery has thinner ones. When you cycle the battery, those plates flex and shed material, and that material falls into a sludge at the bottom of the cell. Thin plates shed faster. Once the sludge bridges the gap between the plates, the cell shorts internally, and the whole battery's voltage starts sagging under load. The consequence is a car that turns over slowly, or not at all, on the first cold morning that drops below freezing. That's the chain: thin construction, faster shedding, earlier internal short, surprise no start. I want to add another piece, because plate thickness isn't the only thing that varies between price tiers. The separator material between those plates matters too. A premium battery uses a thicker, more uniform separator that resists punctures from the shed material. A budget battery may use a thinner separator that lets the sludge bridge sooner. The case itself can also vary. Premium cases are typically made from thicker polypropylene, sealed tightly. Budget cases can be thinner, prone to slow leaks around the terminal seals, and the electrolyte level inside drops faster than the owner realizes. By the time the customer notices the symptoms, the battery has been quietly dying for months under the hood. Heat accelerates all of it. Every 10 degrees of sustained engine bay temperature above the design point can shorten battery life by a measurable percentage, and budget batteries have less margin to give. Now to the second archetype, the auto parts chain budget tier. Every major chain has one, sitting on the bottom shelf, marketed at the customer who walked in panicking because their old battery just died. The pitch is reasonable: cheaper unit, shorter warranty, get you back on the road. The problem I see is that this tier of battery is often built to a price point that requires shortcuts somewhere. Sometimes thinner separators, sometimes a lower grade calcium alloy. Sometimes the manufacturing date is older than you'd assume because the unit sat on a shelf in a warehouse for 9 months before it was even sold. A battery that sits unused that long, especially in a warm warehouse, starts sulfating before it ever sees a vehicle. By the time it reaches your engine bay, it's already partway through its useful life. I want you to understand sulfation because it explains a lot of what I see on the bench. Lead-acid batteries develop crystals of lead sulfate on the plates during normal discharge. When the battery is recharged promptly, those crystals dissolve back into the electrolyte when a battery sits at a low state of charge. For too long, the crystals harden and grow, and they stop dissolving on recharge. That hardened sulfate physically blocks the active surface of the plate. Less surface means less current. Less current means slower cranking, dimmer headlights, and eventually a battery that fails a load test, even though its open circuit voltage looks acceptable. A budget battery that sat too long in a warehouse arrives in your engine bay with some of this hardening already in place. The clock started before you bought it. State of charge versus state of health. That distinction matters. State of charge is a snapshot. It tells you how full the battery is right now. State of health is the longer-term picture. It tells you what percentage of the battery's original capacity is still available. A budget battery can be at 100% state of charge and only 70% state of health, which means it's full of what little capacity it has left. The multimeter on the parts counter checks state of charge. The professional load tester in my shop checks state of health. The difference between those two readings is where customers get blindsided. Quick aside, because I get asked this every week. Yes, the manufacturing date matters. There's usually a stamped code on the top or side of the case. The first character is often a letter for the month, the next a digit for the year. A battery stamped from 12 months ago is not the same as a battery stamped from last month, even if the warranty starts the day you bought it. Always look, and while you're at it, check for swelling, white powder around the terminals, or hairline cracks in the plastic. If the case looks tired before you've even bought it, the cells inside almost certainly are tired too. Third archetype is one I see hauled into the shop by recreational boaters who don't realize they bought the wrong thing. The discount tier marine battery sold as automotive. Or, more accurately, the dual-purpose battery that promises to do both jobs and ends up doing neither well. A starting battery is built to deliver a huge burst of current for a short time. A deep cycle battery is built to be slowly drained and slowly recharged. A dual-purpose unit tries to split the difference, which sounds nice on paper. In practice, what I see is a battery that lives in someone's pickup truck because it was on sale, and within 14 to 18 months the plates have shed enough material that the cranking performance is no longer adequate. The owner blames the truck is fine. The battery was the wrong tool for the job from day one. The salesperson who sold it may not have known either. A lot of parts counter staff are trained on price points and group sizes, not on the metallurgy of plate construction. If a battery is in stock and fits the group size your truck needs, it gets recommended. The customer doesn't know to ask whether it's optimized for starting duty or deep cycle duty, and the recommendation feels authoritative. A weekend warrior walks in, asks for a battery for his half-ton pickup, gets handed a dual-purpose unit because it was on the end cap with a sale tag, and walks out feeling like he got a deal. 6 months later, he's calling me to ask why his truck cranks slow in the morning. The answer is sitting under his hood. Fourth, pay close attention. The unbranded Asian import lead-acid you sometimes see at smaller independent parts stores or showing up in online listings at prices that feel too good to be true. I'm not going to name countries or factories because the truth is these units come from a rotating cast of producers, and you genuinely cannot tell who built any individual battery without cracking the case. The warranty paperwork, when it exists, can be hard to honor if the importer changes hands or vanishes. What I've seen in the bay is voltage that looks acceptable on a simple meter check but collapses under load testing. The chemistry inside seems to age fast, whether that's because the lead is impure, or the manufacturing tolerances are loose, or the case seals leak slowly and let moisture in. I honestly can't say without a lab. I just know what I see. Early failure, and a customer left holding paperwork that doesn't help. The online listing problem deserves its own paragraph. Some of these batteries arrive in a generic brown box, No documentation other than a sticker with a phone number that may or may not ring. The shipping is rough on a lead-acid battery. They get tipped, jolted, sometimes stored upside down for days at a sorting facility. By the time the unit reaches your driveway, the active material inside the cells may already be partly shed and settled wrong. You install it, it works at first, and the failure shows up months later when you've forgotten where you bought it. The seller may have already closed the listing and moved on to selling something else. Recourse is theoretical. Now hold that thought, because I want to come back to something I mentioned at the top. I told you the gap between what you paid for and what you got has been widening. I want you to remember that as we go through the next 3 archetypes, because the pattern repeats. Different label, different price, same underlying issue. The cost-cutting happens in places you cannot see from the parking lot. Keep that in your head. We'll connect it to a checklist at the end you can actually use the next time you're standing at a battery display, holding your wallet, trying to decide. The 5th archetype is the one that frustrates me the most because the marketing is so slick. The lifetime warranty bait battery, you've seen the pitch. Buy this unit, and if it ever fails, we'll replace it free forever. Sounds incredible, read the fine print though. In a lot of these programs, the warranty is prorated after the first short window, which means after 18 months, you might get a partial credit toward the next battery, not a free replacement. Some programs require you to return the original battery in person with the original receipt to the original store within a narrow time frame. Some require proof that the failure wasn't caused by, in their words, abuse or neglect, which can be defined to include not having the alternator tested at certain intervals. I've watched customers walk into a store with a dead lifetime warranty battery and walk out with a small credit and a much larger bill for a new unit. The warranty was real, it just didn't cover the situation they were actually in. Mini story here. Couple years back, a fellow named Reggie came in. Retired postal carrier, drove a sensible midsize sedan, took good care of it. He bought one of these lifetime warranty batteries from a national chain, proud of himself for getting what he thought was the deal of the century. 16 months in, the car wouldn't start in his driveway on a Tuesday morning. He jumped it, drove it to the chain, and asked for his free replacement. They tested the battery, agreed it had failed, then walked him through the prorated formula. His credit came out to about $38. The replacement battery he needed was $190. Reggie wasn't angry. Exactly, he was tired. He looked at me when he finally rolled into my shop a week later and said, "I thought I was being smart." I told him he was being smart with the information he had. The information just wasn't complete. That conversation stuck with me because it captures the whole problem. The customer wasn't lazy or careless. He read what was in front of him and trusted it. The fine print did the rest. I think about Reggie every time a customer asks me whether the lifetime warranty is worth paying extra for. My honest answer is, it depends entirely on the fine print, and the fine print is rarely included in the price tag. Read every clause before you buy. Look for words like prorated, full replacement, original purchaser only, non-transferable. A warranty that only protects the original purchaser is worthless if you sell the car within the coverage window. A warranty that requires the failed unit to be returned to the original store of purchase is a problem you've moved across the country. Coverage is a promise, and the value of a promise depends entirely on how it's written and how it's enforced. The 6th archetype is one most drivers never consider: the rebadged factory rejects. Now, I want to be careful with how I describe this, because not every off-brand battery is a reject, and I'm not accusing any specific company of anything. What I am saying is that in the battery industry, units that fail quality control at a major manufacturing plant don't always go into a dumpster. Sometimes they get sold off in bulk to smaller distributors who slap a new label on them and sell them at a discount. These units may have failed for cosmetic reasons, which is fine, or they may have failed for performance reasons that aren't visible to the beer, which is not fine. There's no easy way to tell from the outside. What I notice in the shop is that certain regional house brands cycle through suppliers in a way that suggests they're buying whatever's available, and the failure rates I see on these units run higher than I'd expect. I'll just say I've learned to be skeptical of a deeply discounted battery from a brand that didn't exist 2 years ago. The economics make sense if you think about it from the manufacturer's side. A large battery plant produces tens of thousands of units a month. Even a low single-digit reject rate produces hundreds of batteries that don't meet first-quality specifications. Sending those to a landfill costs money. Selling them off in bulk to a wholesaler recovers some of the cost. The wholesaler then resells them, often through smaller channels where the beer is less likely to compare them against the original quality units. Nothing about this is illegal, and nothing about it is unique to batteries. The trouble for you, the consumer, is that the discount you see at the register may reflect not a great deal, but a unit that didn't quite pass the standard the brand name version was built to meet. The seventh archetype, and this is the climax of the list because it's the one most likely to leave you stranded somewhere inconvenient, is the deep cycle marketed as starting. The opposite mistake from archetype 3, but just as costly. Some sellers will push a deep cycle battery as a fine choice for a car or light truck, especially if you've got accessories like a winch or an aftermarket sound system. The pitch is that the deep cycle handles repeated draining better, which is true. What they don't always mention is that a deep cycle battery typically has fewer plates than a starting battery of the same physical size because each plate is thicker. Fewer plates means less surface area, which means less cranking current. On a cold morning, when your starter motor needs every amp it can pull, the deep cycle may produce significantly less than its rated cranking amps after just a year of use. The car cranks slowly, then it doesn't crank at all. You're standing in your driveway with a coffee cup steaming in your hand and your phone out, looking up roadside assistance. If you do have heavy electrical accessories, the answer is usually not to substitute a deep cycle for a starting battery. The answer is to upgrade to a higher capacity starting battery with appropriate reserve capacity, or in some cases, to run a dual battery setup where a dedicated starting battery handles the engine and a separate auxiliary battery handles the accessories. The dual battery approach is overkill for most drivers, but for somebody running an aftermarket winch on a work truck or a serious sound system that draws significant current at idle, it's the right architecture. One more failure pattern because it sneaks up on people. Heat cycling. A battery that lives in an engine bay reaches high temperatures every time the engine runs, then cools when the vehicle sits. Each cycle stresses the seals between the plates and the case, the internal welds between cells, and the bond between active material and the grid. Premium batteries are built with materials and tolerances that handle thousands of these cycles without significant degradation. Budget batteries are built for fewer cycles before measurable performance loss appears. In a hot climate, a budget battery can age the equivalent of 2 years for every 1 calendar year because the cycling is more severe. The 18-month failure I mentioned at the top of this script is not an arbitrary number. It tracks what I see, particularly on vehicles parked outside through hot summers. Let me give you the contrast pair that ties all this together. On one bench in my shop last winter, I had two batteries side by side, same group size, same physical dimensions. One was a premium AGM unit from a well-known manufacturer, 3 years old, pulled from a customer's car during an unrelated repair. The other was a budget unit from a discount chain, 16 months old, pulled because the vehicle wouldn't start. I ran the same load test on both. The premium AGM held voltage above 9.6 volts under the full load for the full 15 seconds. The budget unit collapsed to 7.1 volts within 4 seconds, same group size, same shape. Vastly different internal construction. The customer who bought the budget unit saved roughly $70 at purchase. They spent that savings, plus more, on a tow truck and a new battery and a morning of lost work. When I cracked open the budget unit later, The difference became obvious. The plates were noticeably thinner. The separator material was visibly cheaper, almost like a coarse paper rather than a dense matting. The active material on the plates had shed more than I'd expect at 16 months, and the bottom of the case held a soft gray sludge that should not have been there yet. The Premium AGM, when I sectioned a comparable unit from a salvage source for training purposes, showed dense plates, tightly bound active material, and a separator design that clearly resisted the migration of debris between cells. The visual difference inside the case explained the load test difference on the bench. You're not paying for the label, you're paying for what's behind the label. Here's the snapshot for the busy listener, 30 seconds. Cold morning, 28 degrees, your driveway. You turn the key, the dashboard lights flicker. The starter clicks but doesn't crank. You try again, slower this time, then nothing. You pop the hood, the battery looks fine. No corrosion on the terminals, no swelling on the case. But the voltage at rest reads 12.2 volts and falls to under 10 under any load. That battery is at end of useful life, and it gave you almost no warning. If it's less than 2 years old and it came from any of the categories I just walked you through, that pattern is not unusual. Memorize it, so how do you protect yourself? Couple things I tell every customer who asks. First, check the manufacturing date stamp before you buy. If it's more than 6 months old, walk away. Second, look at the actual cold cranking amp rating compared to your owner's manual recommendation. Don't go below what the manufacturer specified. Third, take the warranty paperwork seriously. Read what counts as a valid claim. Note whether the warranty is prorated and from what date. Take a photo of the receipt and store it in your phone because the paper one will fade. Fourth, every 6 months or so, have the battery load tested. Most reputable shops will do it free. A weakening battery shows up on a load test months before it leaves you stranded. Fifth, consider where the battery will live. If your vehicle parks in a garage that stays above freezing, the temperature stress on the battery is lower than if it sits outside in a driveway through a hard winter. Sixth, think about your driving pattern. Short trips don't fully recharge the battery, and over time, the state of charge drifts lower, which accelerates sulfation. If you drive mostly short distances, plan to drive at highway speed for at least 20 minutes a week, or use a quality maintainer when the vehicle sits. Seventh, keep your terminals clean. Corrosion at the terminals raises resistance, which makes the alternator work harder and the battery deliver less. A small wire brush, a baking soda solution, and 10 minutes once a year goes a long way. Park can stand draw matters more than people realize. Modern cars draw small amounts of current even when they're off to keep computers, alarms, and keyless entry systems alive. That parasitic draw, multiplied over a week of sitting in an airport parking lot, can flatten a marginal battery. If your driving pattern includes long periods of sitting, a smart trickle charger plugged in at home is cheap insurance. Wait, let me correct something I said a minute ago. I said most reputable shops will load test for free. That's true in my area, but it's worth calling first because some shops charge a small fee now. Just ask before you drive over. Few more notes on what to watch for. If your headlights dim noticeably when you come to a stop with the engine idling, that can be a sign of an aging battery, and it's worth a test. If your car cranks slower in cold weather than it did last winter, that's data too. If the engine starts fine after a short drive but cranks weakly after a few days sitting, you may have a parasitic draw exceeding what the battery can replenish. None of these symptoms guarantee the battery is the cause, but they all warrant a check. Charging system health matters as much as the battery itself, by the way. An alternator that's not putting out the voltage it should will undercharge any battery, premium or budget, and will quietly shorten its life. A bad ground strap between the engine and the chassis can do the same thing. When you have a battery tested, ask the shop to also check the alternator output voltage and the cleanliness of the ground connections. A healthy charging system on a modern vehicle running with the engine at fast idle and minimal loads should typically produce something in the range of 13.8 to 14.6 volts at the battery terminals. Lower than that and the battery is being undercharged. Higher than that, sustained, and the battery is being cooked. Either condition cuts life. Brief word about installation. A new battery installed with corroded clamps or loose terminal connections will fail early, regardless of how good the battery itself is. Vibration damages internal connections, loose terminals create arcing and heat. If you replace a battery yourself, take the extra 5 minutes to clean the clamps, tighten the terminals properly, and confirm the hold down is in place. A note on AGM batteries. AGM, absorbed glass mat, uses a fiberglass separator that holds electrolyte in suspension. The benefits are real: better vibration resistance, better deep cycle tolerance, longer service life than a comparable flooded battery. The downside is price. AGM units cost more, and they require a charging system calibrated for their voltage profile. If your vehicle came with AGM from the factory, replacing it with a cheaper flooded battery is usually a mistake. Replace AGM with AGM. Pay the difference. I want to close this with a picture because the math and the technical talk can run together after a while, and what I really want you to leave with is a feeling for the difference a good battery makes. Picture this: 2 years from now, on a Tuesday in February, the temperature outside your bedroom window is 15 degrees. The wind is moving the trees. You're up early because you've got a meeting that matters, the kind where being late is not really an option. You pull on your coat, walk out into the dark, brush a thin layer of frost off the windshield, and slide into the driver's seat. The cabin smells faintly of cold leather and yesterday's coffee. You turn the key, the starter engages cleanly. The engine catches on the first crank. The dashboard glows steady and even, no flicker, no warning lights. You back out of the driveway, watching the headlights cut through the dark, and you're on the road. You make the meeting. Nobody knows what kind of battery is sitting under your hood, but you do. You picked it carefully 18 months ago, paid a little more than you wanted to, and now it's quietly doing exactly the job you asked it to do. That's the future I want for you, not the one where you're standing in a driveway with a phone in your hand and a tow truck 30 minutes out. The one where the car just starts and you go. Think about that scene next time you're standing at a battery display. The unit on the shelf in front of you is the unit that will be under your hood in February. The choice you make in a fluorescent lit aisle on a quiet Saturday afternoon is the choice that determines whether February arrives as an ordinary morning or a stranded one. Spend the extra time reading the date code. Spend the extra dollars on the better grade. Spend the extra few minutes confirming the warranty terms. February will come whether you prepare for it or not. Your battery is one of the few things you can prepare in advance. If this helped you, do me a favor. Drop a comment with the make and model of your current vehicle and the brand of battery in it right now and roughly how long it's been in there. I read every comment, and patterns show up in those numbers that I genuinely learn from. You might be helping someone else avoid a cold morning they didn't see coming.